India's civil aviation sector, one of the worst affected sectors due to coronavirus pandemic, seems to be gradually limping back to normalcy after the centre allowed domestic flights to resume from May 25. Now, this is one sector which didn't get really what it sought from the government in this unprecedented situation that we are in. COVID has claimed 18,000 plus jobs from this sector. The revenue of Indian carriers has fallen by about 85.69% during April to June quarter this year. But now, some indicators are suggesting that things may be looking up. There are some green shoots. So, does it mean that the worst is behind us as far as aviation sector is concerned? Let's find out from the guests who are joining us on India Revival Mission this week on Times Network. I'm Heena Gambhir. Joining me today is Kinjal Shah, Vice President ICRA. We have Mr. Jitendra Bhargav, former ED, Air India. Sanjeev Kapoor, former Chief Operating Officer, SpiceJet and former Chief Strategy and Commercial Officer, Vistara. Dr. Sanat Kaul, Chairman, International Foundation for Aviation, Aerospace and Drones and former Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation. Welcome all of you on this special broadcast. Let me begin this discussion with you, Sanjeev Kapoor. What is your assessment? Is the worst behind us looking at the current indicators?
Behind us because at the worst, there were zero revenues and zero flights. Right now, we're operating at about 50% of the previous domestic flights, pre-COVID levels, and 40% of pre-COVID passenger levels. So while the worst is behind us, clearly, are you able to hear me, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so while the worst is behind us, we are far from out of the woods yet, because flying 40% of the passengers, 50% of the flights, you're not able to cover your fixed costs and you're barely able to cover the costs of the flights that are operating. So at best, we can say that the airlines are drowning closer to the surface, but they're still underwater.
Okay, far from being out of the woods. But Dr. Kaul, a few days ago, we heard the Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Hardeep Puri, saying that we could touch the pre-COVID figures between Diwali and New Year. Do you think so?
Well, it's very difficult to confirm what we're saying, but certainly the flights are picking up. But let me say one thing, that the confidence is very low. Confidence of the passengers, confidence of the people who go on holiday, the leisure tourists, the hotels, and therefore there is a need now to build the confidence. And in fact, I had written about it, and there was also a CII seminar on this. Basically, it's time to build up what they call the cold chain, a COVID cold chain, meaning that starting from your house, the taxi, the airport, the airline, everything should be so safe that people have the confidence to travel, and then they will get into the hotel. And I think one of the things which is missing in India is proper testing, like the RT-PCR test, which is kind of the gold standard, which should be there for a flight, for a person to regain confidence, taking a flight, going to a resort, coming back. Leisure tourists are still, in a way, much less in missing. Those who have to fly, essential tourists, essential flyers are flying. And I think we could link it up also, not only aviation alone, but aviation and hospitality sectors both have suffered very badly. And there has to be a major effort at confidence building.
Okay, let's take your opening comments as well, Mr. Jitendra Bhargav. The kind of demand revival that we have seen, is it the pent-up demand, or do you see some kind of a confidence returning back into the travellers?
You see, the best way of judging whether the confidence is getting back or the minister's optimism that between Diwali and New Year we'll attain the pre-COVID level, let's look at what triggers air travel first. The business travel, are the seminars, conferences, business meetings taking place that will make executive or various companies travel? The answer is clearly no. We are still far, far away from it. Then there is the social travel. People travel, visiting friends and relatives, attending weddings, attending even unfortunate demises in the family, etc., etc. The third category are the people leisure travel. Are people really traveling going on vacations? The answer is again no. And then the fourth category of people, when you have international travelers coming into India and as part of tourism going to various parts of India. Is that happening? So I basically feel the demand destruction that took place when the lockdowns were imposed or the restrictions were put by various countries for air travel is still there. People are gradually getting back. It is not just pent-up demand has been met quite some months ago. There are people traveling, but the pace at which the market is growing is very low. As Sanjeev very rightly said, it's about 40% at the moment. You are still 60% away. And it will be 60%, it will be more difficult than the 50% that we were seeing in the last 3.5 months. So it is going to take time. And we cannot say, look, India will behave differently from global trends. Airlines world over have already put it in, I think, ambitious, not very ambitious kind of a thing. They're saying till 2023, 2024 is when they will be looking at normalcy return. Look at Australia, for example. There is a restriction. Canada has just imposed restrictions. So it will be quite some time when normalcy gets back. And unless normalcy in air travel, which will have to be preceded by normal behavior, normal business travel, leisure travel, corporate travel, etc., will have to take place. So I am certainly not sharing the optimism expressed by the Honorable Minister of Civil Aviation.
Okay, what is your view, Kinjal Shah? ICRA has recently come out with a report as well, suggesting that on a sequential basis, even though official numbers have not been released yet, from August to September as well, there has been about 37% growth in domestic passenger traffic.
Yeah, so I agree with the other panelist members in terms of the recovery still being much far away. Yes, sequentially, we have seen a significant improvement. August to September, we've seen around 37% growth in the passenger traffic. But on a YOY basis, if you were to compare to September 2019 levels, it would still be lower by around 66 odd %. And overall, if you were to take H1 FY21, that is from April to September, because of the 2-month lockdown that we had seen and shutdown of operations of the airlines, the passenger traffic is still much lower by around 84% compared to the period in the last fiscal. So yes, the leisure and the business travel has to pick up, and currently because of the scare of the coronavirus spread among the passengers, we are not seeing the kind of pickup in the leisure travel, and also because of the work from home situation for most of the business houses, we are still seeing a lot of business travel yet to pick up. So yes, recovery will be still much far away.
Okay.
Though yes, sequentially we are seeing improvement.
Okay. Mr. Sanjeev Kapoor, now I want to ask you, are right kind of steps being taken at this point in time to bring the confidence of travellers back as far as air travel is concerned in your assessment?
In my assessment, there are 3 or 4 things that need to happen for air travel confidence to come back. Number one, there has to be a reduced fear of catching COVID. And I think the airlines and airports are doing the best they can. But the innate fear that passengers have of traveling, that needs to go away, and that we don't know how long it will take for that fear to go away, even though the airlines and airports are doing the best they can to protect passengers, disinfect, provide masks, face shields, etc. The second is the quarantine requirements, which vary from state to state and keep changing. That is also a big deterrent to air travel, because people don't want to be stuck in quarantine or get stuck if there's a sudden change in the rules and you can't come back, etc. A couple of other things which are also holding back travel is, as the panelists have pointed out, business travel is obviously down because most businesses are still at work from home. And there have been substitutes or alternates found that you no longer need to travel, between cities for a 1-hour meeting. So maybe that's a permanent change that might be taking place. And finally, people's incomes are down as well. I mean, this pandemic has created havoc in the economy. It's created havoc in people's personal incomes. And therefore, their ability to afford travel, the proclivity to travel, discretionary travel, has also come down. So the 2 things that can change things and can make travel get back closer towards normal is if fear of COVID goes away, which will only happen if there's a vaccine, and if quarantines go away. In the meantime, if a testing regime can be put into place by which every passenger is tested prior to departure, some kind of rapid test at the airport, and only those who test negative are allowed to fly, and therefore do not need to serve quarantine, I think that will help in bringing back some demand.
Okay, but unfortunately, both are not in our hands. We don't know when the vaccine is going to come. We don't know how the states are going to decide on quarantining passengers who are coming by air. In a situation like this, what is the solution? What is the way out for airlines?
You see, it's not the airline which are going to decide air travel. It's the normalcy in all social activities which trigger air travel is going to decide. Only if there is a purpose, people will travel. And of course, there are multiple factors. As Sanjeev pointed out, one thing was work from home and video conferencing is one element that's come in here. The second is people are not going to be, because they are going to be traveling from one place to another. And the third and the more important thing is people will wait for normalcy to come, and only then will they start traveling. And then also, the element of fear would certainly be there. And we all know vaccine is far, far away. And then you have the biggest stipulation, and which is being stipulated by none other than the Minister of Civil Aviation. People above 65 years and above are discouraged to undertake air travel. Now imagine if a large chunk of people are taken away who usually travel visiting friends and relatives or visiting their children who are working in other cities of the kind. How are you going to attain the normalcy in air travel? So unless you have social activities back in place, conferences, seminars, tourism places are open and run no risk of infecting people, only then can you attain a semblance of normalcy, in my opinion. First, create environment where people can travel. And then people will decide, yes, must I travel or not, or can I defer my travel?
Okay. Dr. Kaul, you gave a very interesting suggestion of having a COVID cold chain, perhaps to boost the confidence of the air travelers. How do you think that can become a reality? And do you think perhaps government needs to help the sector at this point in time? Because we haven't really seen a direct help really coming from the government in its bailout package as well for this sector specifically.
Okay, let me give you an example to begin with. Recently, one lady had to rush to London because of family affair, and she had to decide how to travel. And it was looked up all the airlines. The costing, of course, varied, but it was decided that we will go by British Air. Why? Because British Airways insists on a COVID PCR test, which is the gold thing. Otherwise, if you take an ordinary test, an antigen test, the person sitting next to you could be negative, but could be a silent candidate. So you're always worried, and the confidence is very low. So PCR test is things you have to take 72 hours or so in advance, and then you go.
Mr. Sanjeev Kapoor, do you think that probably this kind of an unprecedented situation can be used by airline as an opportunity to perhaps offer to the travelers something more than what they were offering so far? For example, I was reading a couple of days ago, an airline in UAE has included the COVID test a part of its ticket. Like if somebody is purchasing a ticket, COVID test is going to be mandatory. Do you think perhaps those kind of issues can be included and considered? Then apart from that, probably picking up the guest from the house via a taxi and then dropping the guest to wherever that person wants to travel. So if all of this can be packaged in some way or the other, something of this sort can be considered by airlines? Do you think it's a possibility?
I absolutely think it is. There are things airlines can do. Let me just give you an example. Last month, I traveled to the UK and the US, and I had a choice of airlines, and I chose to travel Virgin. And this is not an ad for Virgin. This is just my personal experience. The reason I chose to travel Virgin is because Virgin is including COVID insurance automatically in the ticket price. You don't have to pay extra for the COVID insurance. And they guarantee you up to £500,000 of COVID insurance if anything happens COVID-related to you during your journey. So that, for me, was a decision driver for which airline I chose. Some other airlines are also assuring the seat next to you will be kept empty. Now, there's a cost to it. There's a risk to it to the airline. But airlines at Delta and Southwest in the U.S. have done this, and they've seen that demand has actually gone up because passengers want to fly those airlines and are willing to pay higher fares because they know that the seat next to them is going to be empty. So that's something the airlines can consider on a voluntary basis. Other things that airlines can do to help ease, put some peace of mind into the minds of travelers is make the change in cancel policies very, very liberal now. So allow cancellations, allow changes, allow refunds for new bookings in a manner that people will be encouraged to take the risk and say, all right, let me make a booking and I intend to travel. And if something changes, they will not be penalized for it. I think so. A lot of these out-of-the-box ideas can be tried. They're not without risk because, if you make the changes free, you lose out on that revenue. If you make the next seat empty, you lose out on the potential revenue. But sometimes the upside from it can outweigh the risk that you might be taking in doing this. And the airlines around the world, again, have shown that it may be a risk worth taking. In terms of including the cost of a COVID test, yes, that can also be included in the insurance, which is baked into the ticket fare. You can say that not only are you covered in case you catch COVID, but we'll also pay, if you buy the ticket on this airline, we'll also pay for your RT-PCR test. Those things can be done, and I think in India, airlines, other than making sure that passengers have PPE and are protected and aircraft are clean, etc., they haven't done too much on these other elements which airlines abroad have done, and maybe that's something they could try.
Okay, very interesting set of ideas there. Kinjal Shah, you've been interacting with representatives from various airlines as well. Do you think there is this intent to try these kind of out-of-the-box ideas to woo passengers back?
Yes, definitely. I mean, obviously, because the airlines are facing a very difficult situation right now, there are attempts from all sides to boost passenger confidence and increase the number of passengers traveling on a daily basis. Yes, but I think there would be some kind of difficulties in practical implementation. While, say, one could include these COVID tests, etc., for the international travel, but for the domestic travel specifically, when the price point itself is much lower, would the customer be willing to pay that additional cost for the COVID test, etc., would be a cause of concern. International travel, yes, because of the higher fare charges, etc., those additional costs would not be very significant in terms of increase in the cost for the consumer traveling. Okay. But for the domestic, this could be one of the deterrent. But yes, in order to boost the confidence of the passengers, these are some of the ways the airlines would have to try out.
So, Mr. Jitendra Bhargav, even if the intent would be there, the problem will be, the issue of money, because airfares we know are still capped between 2,000 to 18,600. Do you think a relaxation now is needed on this aspect as well, like relaxation has come on other issues?
Oh, absolutely. First place, the government had no business putting a cap. It should have been allowed to the market to determine what fares people are willing to pay. And it hasn't helped because of the airlines or of more people traveling by airlines. It would be a welcome thing if government stays away, allows the airlines to attract. They will come out with innovative ideas how to attract passengers. But as one of the other panelists very rightly said, it's all about economics. Indian carriers are not well off financially. Most of them would need infusion, and you very rightly said the government of India hasn't come up with any kind of assistance for the Indian carriers. Of course, they could have certainly waived, even if they were not to infuse money in airlines or give them funding, they could have at least relaxed conditions as far as taxations are concerned. Because the more people travel, it has an economic activity catalyst, Whether you are traveling to a city of tier 1, tier 2 city, it creates a lot of economic activity. So government should have leveraged the airline industry and said, look, this is also one industry which can help boost the economy or revive economy in various cities, which unfortunately, as I've always maintained, the government of India has never understood what civil aviation is all about.
Very interesting. In fact, this India Revival Mission show is all about finding solutions in the time of COVID, in these unprecedented times that we are all in. Thank you very much, all of you, for these wonderful set of ideas that you've given us to bring the Indian aviation sector back on track. Thank you very much for joining us here on Times Network.